Welcome in, everyone. We are BTB Analytics. College football week 0 in the books. College football week 1, one of the greatest days on the calendar, coming up right around the corner here. So, want to be with you guys and be really efficient. Break down some matchups going into week 1 here. We'll briefly talk about week 0 and what happened, and kind of the chaos that unfolded, and then give you guys some data, some information on markets, and some other hopefully good takeaways for again college football week 1 here. So Seth, Steve, glad to be back, gentlemen. I want to pull up the matchup map here.
Yep.
Coming out of week 0. Quick caveat here: we have not updated this since we last saw it, or since you guys have maybe been to our website again, btb-analytics.com to check it out. But week 0's in the books. I think the craziest thing was that there were 4 games, all 4 dogs covered, and all 4 dogs covered by more than a touchdown. So, Seth, I'm going to start with you, man. Probably pretty unexpected, right? But what was your takeaway from week 0?
Yeah, for sure. All 4 dogs covering unexpected. You know, that encompasses just one word, variance, right? So for any of you and most of you degens out there, I already know the logic. This is the way it's going to go this week. It's going to go 2 extremes. All the dogs covered last week, so all the dogs are going to cover this week, or all the dogs covered last week, so none of the dogs can cover this week. So I caution you to not use that logic. Remember, you're betting into a marketplace, and variance can happen in 4 games. But I do want to point something out here. I have to say, I'm very perplexed by this Florida State house fire that the media and the public is kind of jumping on, that Florida State wasn't an upset. In my mind, the answer is kind of. The reason I say kind of is this game opened at 13 and the market bought this all the way to 10 and a half at kick, meaning pretty much this was a unabated line move. There was no support to buy Florida State except at the 10. So a lot of the market was sitting on Florida State to cover that game. So is it even that crazy that Florida State ended up losing that game where most of the sport was on Georgia State? I mean, Georgia State is a much better team than maybe the public was thinking, but the professional sports betting community was betting on Georgia Tech.
Right. Steve, what about you, man? Let's jump in here real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's week 0, it's week 1. You're going to have overreactions left and right. And I think really what you're seeing is a public sentiment that Florida State was his team. They were like the anti-Cinderella last year, right? With Jordan Travis going down, the whole CFP fiasco, and then getting blown out in their playoff game with essentially their entire roster not playing. You saw here, they're motivated, they're hungry, they're going to make a stand, and people expected it to be a bloodbath. They thought they were going to come out, and this is why we talk so much about you can't model emotions. You can't really put too much weight into that human sentiment because, everyone thought that FSU was going to come out and, demolish Georgia Tech. And that first drive of the game, they thought they might, scoring a touchdown, going for 2. But after that, you really just saw football play out as we expected it to in terms of, the law of averages and kind of seeing who these teams really were.
Yeah, talk about
Go.
You hear about a announcer's jinx, right? I was in the car listening to the game on ESPN radio, and after they scored that touchdown and then the 2-point conversion, the announcers had the audacity to call it a dagger. After not even the first quarter's not even over. Touchdown, 2-point conversion, the dagger in Georgia Tech, they're done for, baby. So I thought that was pretty hilarious.
That first drive looked good. I have to say, like being a Georgia Tech backer there, I was like, oh wow, they look really efficient. But like the run efficiency for Georgia Tech, like was there. It just I have to say in my mind, the SMU Nevada game was way more in the category of a what the fuck was going on thing than I would classify Florida State. And can I also say, I feel like I never thought I'd say these words. Is DJ Uyunglele getting too much hate? The dude had 2 key 4th down completions to put them in that game to tie the game, right? Which was clutch. And all I'm hearing is how shitty he was when his receivers dropped the ball multiple times. Like I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. I don't want to be a Florida State truther, and I don't want to be a DJ Uyunglele truther here, but like I feel like I'm like screaming from the rooftops of like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
Yeah, that's funny. I saw a couple of things circulating real quick. So I agree with you on the SMU point. That one, and I don't know if it's just because we also have been pretty high on them coming into this season, and obviously have some futures on them as well, kind of playing with the emotions a little bit. But yeah, the DJ Uyunglele stuff. I mean, at one point he was 12 of 14 and a negative -0.1 average depth of target, average air yards. It was insane. Like he was throwing passes behind the line of scrimmage. Like so people were railing against him during the game, you know. But yeah, to your point, like I guess it's just people love to hate him. What can you say?
But shout out under 9.5 Florida State wins. Feels good having one game under, right? Like can't really get better. Good. It was a good little double dip for us. But I have to say the SMU stuff feels deader than dead. I'm like imagining that offensive line going against Miami. I was like, RIP.
Hey, to Steve's point about not being able to quantify, you know, certain metrics, like, you know, hey, maybe there is some sort of unquantifiable wake up call that they all can over at SMU can finally realize and turn the shit around. Because yeah, I'm with you. I had the same thought. I'm like, this is
if Nevada's defensive line can do that to you,
yeah,
just like
you're
like imagine what Miami's defensive line is going to do.
Yeah, speaking of Nevada, yeah, because that's well, just to tease that briefly ahead of what week 1 looks like. There's some interesting, maybe overreaction. I don't know. We can discuss when we get there, but talk about line movement of the week. So, all right, week 0's in the books. We have week 1 coming up here. So I want to go over some key matchups for this week, guys. Not all of these games are going to be games that we have an edge on or anything like that, but we just want to highlight a couple of, in our opinion, key matchups, you know, top-ranked teams and intriguing matchups and things like that. So, and real quick before we dive in, if you guys are watching, again, please remember to give the video a like. Please remember to give the channel, hit the subscribe button. Helps us out tremendously. We want to keep bringing you guys content that you enjoy, content that is valuable for you. So, all right, let's dive in. Penn State, West Virginia. First up, shall we? Yes. So, Seth, I want to start with you here. So a couple of interesting things. So one, this number, talk a little bit about the opening spread and where it currently is, because correct me if I'm wrong here, the way we pull in week 0/week 1 spreads is a little bit of an art as much as it is science here.
Yeah, you mean like forecasting it? Yeah, so for forecasting week 1, you're using all of the previous season's data, and then you're doing a basically adjustment on, you know, returning production, returning offensive and defensive coordinator, head coach tenure, returning quarterback, all of these kind of updated ideas of who the new roster is, as well as then an updated talent number. And both these teams are quite interesting. West Virginia's returning 89% of their offense, but only 52% of their defense. Their total talent rank, if we look at their ranking of the roster, is 54th in the nation. But the interesting thing here is 0 blue chip ratio. This is a team that has no 4- and 5-star recruits, versus Penn State returning 74% of their returning production, 74% of their offensive returning production, 66% of their defensive returning production. But their team talent score is the 11th best roster in the nation, and 57% of their rosters 4- and 5-star recruits. So this is definitely a lopsided talent game, but the market is basically nonstop bought up West Virginia. Spoiler alert, we're also on this. We were able to buy it and get a 10.5 almost a month ago. And it's basically been all West Virginia all week. And you can see where it's at now, 8.5. And actually right before we recorded, some money hit the market. This is now sitting at 8.
Yeah, and Steve, I want to jump to you real in 1 second, but I want to maybe give a little bit of context to some of the numbers that, you know, people are seeing on the screen here. So we did a very similar format last year and had a lot of these statistics and advanced metrics up here, and these are metrics that go into our model as well, but a couple of new ones and some that people might not be familiar with. So Seth, bring back to you for a sec. Can you point out or give a little more context to 2 of these here? So number 1, offensive and defensive WEPA per play, which stands for weighted EPA per play. And then further the last, looking at the last 3 columns here. So run rate and then offense, or excuse me, 1 over to that, but run rate and then echo rate over expected. If you could just touch on those, please.
Yeah, so weighted EPA is very similar to an EPA per play, but what we're looking at is what types of plays should be upweighted and downweighted. A good example is quarterback design runs should hold a little bit of weight when we're looking at how impactful they are, because they are more impactful to the overall game outcome. Things that should be downweighted are things like penalties and specific types of plays. Don't want to give away too much of the magic, but there is an algorithmic approach to how you generate weighted EPA, but it's an EPA based model. And then echo rate, again, is a drive level statistic that tells us how well teams are driving. So basically, an echo is defined as achieving a drive that gets to 40 yard line or better, or results in a touchdown. And you can see that when we have an echo rate over expected, we're looking at what would an average team done on that drive and what did that team do. And you can see West Virginia's offense is, good in weighted EPA, but also echo rate over expected. And then something that we think is really crucial is, what do teams do on early downs? How successful are they on early downs? Because how successful you are on early downs is a leading indicator on how successful you're going to be in the game, right? If you're throwing a lot on first down, this is something you want to see, but we ultimately want to see how successful are you, in first and second down.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, I just want to make sure people aren't looking at this and saying, "What the hell? What the hell am I looking at?" So
these are highly
Steve,
highly statistically significant variables.
Yes,
we have these free on the website.
Picked.
You don't gotta pay for it. You can go and get these for every single team. If you're not already using these statistics, I highly recommend you do them, or you start using them. They will help you win a lot of games.
Yeah. All right, Steve, let me get you in here for a sec here. All right, so again, West Virginia, West Virginia, Penn State. To Seth's point earlier, too, Penn State, one of the best defenses in the nation last year. They led the nation actually in sacks and tackles for loss. So, does the West Virginia, do the Mountaineers have enough offensive firepower to combat that, or what are you expecting out of this game?
Yeah, I mean, let me take a step back here, because when I first saw this, I was definitely scared. I'm not gonna lie to you. You look at Penn State. Penn State's an elite team. Their biggest flaw is they have to play Michigan and Ohio State every year, right? You go back to the last 2 seasons, regular season record for Penn State, 10-2. Only losses were to Michigan and Ohio State. CFP ranked number 10 last year, number 11 the year before. So you take away one of those losses, this is a team that legitimately could be in the conversation for the CFP. And who knows what happens once you get to that 4-game playoff. So I want to set the record straight that I am not one of these folks on this bandwagon that, Penn State is overrated. They're not going to be that great. I think they're going to be an elite team this year. With that being said, I think if you look at the angle of West Virginia, I think what you're looking at is not necessarily Penn State's defense versus West Virginia's offense, but actually the flip. Penn State's coming in with a lot of new pieces here. So they lost 3 O-linemen to the NFL draft. They lost 2 of their top receivers going out to the draft as well, and to transfer. So we got Keandre Lambert-Smith going off to Auburn, Dante Cephas going off to K-State. And so what does that look like when you lose your upfront protection as well as your top receiver threats, when you have Drew Aller, who's a pure pocket quarterback? He's not going to run you for 100 yards a game. I'll be very interested to see that, because West Virginia did come in last year leading the Big 12 in sacks. So that's the dynamic I'm kind of looking for at that point. Now, on the other hand, you do have the new OC, Andy Kotonecki from Kansas, high power offensive team. So can he implement that in Penn State? The last thing I'm looking at is going back to your point about the defense. So Chop Robinson from Penn State, he's now gone to the NFL. Can West Virginia, which is a great running team, pop off some explosive plays with their running back duo? Last year, you had Jaheim White and CJ Dawson Jr. really leading the way with explosive plays and running yards. And you can see here on their offensive weighted EPA per play, a lot of that is from the run. So my angle here is defense, keep them into the game. West Virginia's defense, keep them to the game. Can West Virginia's offense pop off some great run plays, keep it close, and cover the 10.5? Well, in the 8.5 now, we'll see, but what we care about is the 10.5. So it's reassuring the market has backed us, and it's going our favor. But my butthole will be a little bit clenched going into this game.
Yeah, and I think one thing you got to point out there too, new defensive coordinator also for Penn State. So what do we get there? There's some question marks. And then one thing I want to talk about is that offensive coordinator for Penn State, the new offensive coordinator coming from Kansas, mostly running quarterbacks. Now, obviously they threw the hell out of the ball, so I don't want to go too crazy here, but like you said, can Drew Aller actually, quote unquote, operate in this offense? There's a lot of question marks here. And I agree with you. Penn State covers games, period. And their head coach makes it a point to cover games. So I think if there's a chance, if we're covering, it's a 7-point game, there's a high probability that late in this game, if Penn State gets a chance to score, even when it's meaningless for the game state, that they will. So I think that's another thing you want to be cognizant of. It'll be interesting to see as we're here on Wednesday, as we get closer to kickoff on Saturday. Does anybody in the market start to buy Penn State? This is getting to 8, and we haven't hit any buys on Penn State. Are we going to see some resistance finally in the marketplace because of those exact reasons, where like ultimately you're getting a top 10 team? A lot of people, I know Bud Elliott put them in on the college football playoff. I mean, this is supposed to be a team that's going to achieve, a lot this season, and, presumably covering an 8-point spread to West Virginia should be part of that resume.
Yeah, I will say real quick to your point about covering spreads, the two coaches that scare me the most in college football is James Franklin and PJ Fleck. Those guys do not give a F about your feelings or your spreads.
Yeah.
So,
well, they care. Yeah, they care about the spread. Like it's
not your spread, their spread.
Their spread. Yeah, they're covering for their alumni, and I think more coaches should approach this. Now, I will point out one caveat: are we in a new age, in a new, reality? That's all, fine and dandy to do when we're not in a 12-team playoff, when you have to go and play potentially 4 extra games. Attrition now and the longevity of the season is a whole different, cowboy or whatever you want to call it. We've seen, coaches like Dan Lanning, they've been consulting with NFL teams to talk about playing a 17, 18 game schedule, because remember, this is not normal for college football, but as part of the playoff, you're going to be playing multiple, potentially multiple additional games. And so do you still do those crazy things? Do you still go for those extra drives? Because it puts your team, one, at risk, but it's just putting wear and tear on your team when you got to go 4 extra games. And so maybe there's some reprieve here. I still am very scared like you are, but it is a point here we may be seeing it in the season. And, another thing to think about as far as covers and over-unders, do teams at the top shut it down when they get leads because of these, war of attrition thing that's going to go on?
Yeah, interesting angle for sure. We'll see. Let's hope West Virginia gets the ball to end the game and can maybe give a backdoor or something. We'll see. All right, moving on. That's the first matchup. Let's head on over to this one. This game is in Atlanta, right? Yeah. So Clemson and Georgia next up on the docket here. So, I mean, talk about a tumultuous offseason. Georgia is one arrest away from just losing this game outright. Like, they've had a lot of crazy stuff happen, man. It's been fascinating to see what Kirby Smart is going to do once the season begins, and maybe it'll just be water under the bridge. Maybe this game kicks off and it's, hey, good old Georgia back like nothing ever happened. But nonetheless, this is an interesting one. So Seth, I want to bring you back here. This one opened again at 13. Our number puts it at 13 as well. And the current spread is hanging around 13.5 in most places. And you can see that there's an ever so slight edge on Clemson at a 13.5. I was looking at Unabated's odd screen earlier. Shout out. Use our code BTB, get a free 5-day trial. But you can get a Clemson 13.5 plus 100 at Caesars. And by doing that, shout out to our website, BTB-Analytics.com. If you go to our EV calculator page, you can type in 13.5 plus 100 odds. It becomes a bet, technically speaking, with a 3% edge. So if you're interested, I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but if you're interested in backing Clemson here, 13.5 plus 100 at Caesars, you can do that. So, all right, Seth, what's your assessment here coming into this one for Georgia and Clemson?
This is a really tough game. I mean, I will say the market has given us a little bit of information where we currently sit. And with week 1 spreads and market, you get a unique opportunity to basically have a 3-month market, right? Where these spreads are posted. Most of the Division I teams, week 1 spreads were posted on June 1st. So this market is been open for a lot longer than a normal week. So we've gotten some information. There's been a lot of support for Clemson plus 14. The market has gotten there a couple times, and every time we get to Clemson 14, it gets bought back down to 13.5, 14. And that's what we're currently seeing at this 13.5. I'm not necessarily surprised to hear what you're saying, Kevin. I mean, you can see that there's about a 1% edge on a normal 110 VIG. So at plus 100, this starts to make some sense. But it's very difficult to understand what you're buying with both these teams. Georgia's returning 76% of their offense. They're returning 55% of their defense. This is the third overall talented roster as far as recruiting, and blue chip ratio 82%. Clemson's returning 79% of their offense and 49% of their defense. The seventh overall team talent rating and a 62% blue chip ratio. You've alluded to it. Georgia's got some issues at running back. We don't know if ETN's going to play. Their backup to ETN is injured, but we are talking about a team like Georgia who we know is going to be deep at, a position like running back. And then Clemson, a team that has refused to use the portal. We don't really know what we're getting, although we do know that with a seventh overall team talent rating, this is going to be a highly competitive roster that Clemson's putting together. But we've seen Cade Klubnik struggle the last couple of years. Now we're going to see the second year in Riley's offense coming over from TCU 2 seasons ago. So what are we getting here? I have to say, I don't really want to be a Clemson backer at 13.5, but I don't want to be a Georgia backer at 12.5. I really don't know what I'm buying here. This is one of the teams for me where you hear Kirby, sitting there telling you how much lack of depth they have, all this kind of like opposite of Nick Saban rat poison, right? Where he's literally poisoning his own team. Like he's like, basically, you guys suck. My roster sucks. And it just feels so much like doublethink to me, where he's basically just like, yeah, I'm going to tell you guys how bad it is, and I'll be like the worst critic. But the reality is, this is Georgia. We know that they know how to re-up. We know that they know how to recruit well. Do we really expect that this is going to be, a Georgia team that's just going to go out there and be like, oh yeah, we don't got any guys? It's really hard for me to believe that. And then Clemson, I don't know what I'm buying. I kind of want to be a contrarian and lean into that, but I it's a stay away for me personally, even though the value is kind of there on Clemson.
All right, Steve, what are you buying then?
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point earlier, and that's exactly what I wanted to hit on, Seth. For me, 14 is the number, and that's just personal feel good, warm in my heart, warm in my stomach. And there's been a war at that number. And for me, what you're looking at is you're looking at strength on strength, right? We know Georgia comes in with these potent offenses every year, running back, wide receiver, tight end. But you're looking at the loss of Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey this year. What does that offense look like? Now, to Seth's point, 100%, Georgia knows how to reload. Make no mistake about it. Even though that's NFL elite talent, I'm pretty sure Georgia's going to come back with something. For Clemson, though, it's the defensive side of the ball. All their turmoil they've had over the last few years, one thing that's been pretty constant is that the defense will keep you in and win you games when you're talking about Clemson. And so what is going to give? And I think 14 points is for me, is where I feel a lot of comfortable saying Clemson can overcome the uncertainty and cover. And the last point I'll make is, and Seth, you mentioned this, the team talent. I mean, look at those numbers, 25-53 to 25-07 in favor of Georgia, but those are pretty close. And you look at the ranks there, Georgia third in the country in team talent, Clemson number 7. So to me, you have two teams who know each other, or two teams who are elite every year, who have had history together, who have high expectations on both ends. You can argue Clemson's the hungrier team, but again, we won't go into the human sentiment. But this is a game where I do feel like Clemson has the ability to keep this within 2 scores, but I'm not touching it under 14.
Yeah, and I think the 14 is crucial. Like, you getting that push is big, like especially when if you can get it at 110 or better, to be honest. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, if I'm not mistaken, though, there's some question for Clemson at corner from an injury standpoint, and it's actually 2 questions if 2 of their corners are going to play or not. So with when you don't use the transfer portal, who you're not putting a junior back there, you're putting sophomore or true freshman back there. That scares the shit out of me. But, no Ladd McConkey, no Bowers. Those have been the kind of like safe havens for Beck. This is just going to be a good game. I'm kind of happy that we're not officially betting it right now. Yeah. If you can get a 14.5, I think, unfortunately, you have to take all your fears and buy it. But I don't think we're gonna get there. I think this closes right at 13. I'm telling you, I've been watching this market daily. I've been watching it for almost a month now. Almost instantaneous, it gets to 14, it gets immediately bought for Clemson plus 14, back down to 13, 13 and a half.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. My last point on this is the reason why I, in part, haven't bought Clemson yet, even though there's some value at 13 and a half at the number we talked about. Again, Klubnik, like, is he going to be able to air it out? The only person in the ACC who had a lower average depth of target last year was the backup for Virginia. Cade Klubnik did not air it out last year. And against this Georgia defense, I'm not certain that he's going to be able to dink and dunk his way to a 14-point cover. But that's just me. So, all right, let's move on, boys. Again, if you guys are still here, appreciate you giving the video a like. Appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. We're going to keep doing these matchups and breakdowns. How about that? Weekly for you guys. So stick around and keep those notifications on as well. All right, let's move on. We have another game, pretty interesting one in my opinion here. Florida and Miami. This one, again, a coin flip game in terms of how the market is perceiving this. Opening was at 2, and it's currently at 2.5 now. And our number puts this at Miami -1 here. So, Steve, the battle for Florida. This one is in. Where are they playing this one in? Not. Is it Jacksonville?
It's in. No, it's in Gainesville.
I forget. Okay, sorry, my bad. So, all right. What do you think? We talked about in our season preview episode how maybe the market is a lot lower on Florida than we are personally, but what say you going into this matchup with Miami?
Yeah, I mean, this is a coin flip game, and quite frankly, one that I'm staying away from personally. You look at Florida, this is a team that has high expectations and low expectations at the same time, right? You have a team that's coming off 3 straight seasons with a very unimpressive record, and their market win total this year is 4.5, and that is juice to the over, to be fair. But they have a gauntlet of a schedule, and this is a must-win game. I don't know if you can have a must-win in week 1, but just from a morale standpoint, right? Because it does not get any easier than this. And so you look at this Florida team coming in, whether they shine, it's going to be on the offensive side of the ball, and against Miami, where it's, again, strength on strength on the defensive side of the ball, where Miami comes in, you can see with their defensive weighted EPA per play metrics there. The one thing I am curious about, and again, this is not, any sort of analytical stuff, it's just me as a sports fan. How does Miami recover? I mean, because you had one terrible 4th down decision that changed the outlook of the entire season for Miami last year, and where does that leave them now? Can they sort of regroup and shake off the woes of yesteryear? I don't know. So for me, I'm not touching this game, but I am secretly rooting for Florida. I just want to see how they look, because this will be a litmus test for sure.
Yeah. And to your point, Steve, how can they get in Cam Ward? I mean, that could be the kind of catalyst you need. You get a much better quarterback. This is a coin flip game, and I want to point out this is going to be a really good game. This is the classic SEC 230 or 330 spot. Unfortunately, it's not a full SEC matchup, but this is the 11th and 12th ranked team talent rosters. So these teams from a roster construction are pretty much identical. Florida's returning 70% of their offense. 66% of their defense. Miami's returning 79% of their offensive production and 53% of their defense. Obviously, that mistake last season was very costly and really shook up the ACC. I mean, we're high on Florida this season, and by high, we just think they'll win, 5 or 6 games. And one counterpoint to you there, Steve, where you say, I don't know if you can have a must-win game week 1. I mean, this is what I struggle with why everyone doesn't believe in Florida. Georgia's game is a must-win, period. And I would argue Clemson is a tougher opponent than Miami. And I understand it's a 14-point spread, so we, feel a little bit differently about it. Like, oh yeah, Georgia will for sure win. But that's a must-win game for Georgia. They have to win that. So I think that this is a must-win game for Florida, but I think it's reasonable. This is a coin flip game. Don't be surprised if Florida wins this. This is at home in the swamp. I think a lot of question marks you have for Miami. Are you going to get the Cam Ward we saw in a Pac-12 versus SEC talent? Because those are 2 different leagues, and we know that that's the case. Week 1, what does it actually look like with a ton of transfers coming in for Miami? The market bought this. It got as high as +3. Market bought it back down to 2.5. So there has been support some support for Miami +3. I would probably be a buyer at +3.5. I don't think we're going to see it.
Yeah, makes sense. Florida fans, I've been anecdotally hearing a lot of chirping from them, understandably so, given the kind of the prognosticators' forecasts of doom and gloom for them this season, win totals, etc. So, Florida fans, you're watching this. Let us know what you guys think in the comments here. We were higher on them. Just a caveat: we are higher on them than a lot of people are this season, but. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. This one should be a good matchup to assess point. I think Parker Fleming, shout out, gave this his highest watchability score for the coming weekend. So it should be a good one.
Yeah. These teams are like almost identical. They're returning like almost the same production on offense and defense. They almost have the same team talent score. Blue chip ratio, 63% versus 61%. I mean, this is going to be a good game. Can it be a blowout? Could be, but like I really do think I'm leaning Florida, but it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we got a couple more to do, boys. Let's move on down, shall we? Next up, Texas A&M versus Notre Dame. Perhaps probabilistically the defensive battle of the week. I think has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, tied for the lowest over/under score game total for going into week one here. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story for both these teams, right? I mean, Notre Dame is returning 9 starters, and they're returning just generally a ton of defensive production for a defense that was very good and very efficient last year. Yeah. And very similar story with A&M. They weren't as stout as Notre Dame was, but you can see their defensive weighted EPA there. They're not all that dissimilar, and they as well are returning 9 defensive starters here. The one element that I'm kind of thinking of with this one, and Seth, I want to get your opinion on it too, is kind of the battle of the trenches here. Texas A&M with that defensive rush that they have and the front seven. Notre Dame lost 2 starting linemen to the draft last year. And then they are only and then one other one, I don't know if he transferred or what happened to him, but they only have 2 returning starters in the O-line. So
they had one who had a season-ending knee injury.
Oh, is that what the issue
Charles
is?
Jackasaw.
Okay, yeah. So that's the battle of the trenches for me, and this one is what I'm kind of keying in on. And again, like this opened as a pick'em and is now currently sitting at a 3, still a coin flip game. And we put the number at 2, no edge either way, as far as we're concerned. But yeah, Seth, what do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I think the trenches is a good piece, but as why do we let's zoom in. Why do we think trenches can be, causal to, a game going off the rails? You can propagate this out even worse. Notre Dame's got a new offensive coordinator coming in with a new quarterback, Riley Leonard transferring in from Duke. So not only do you not have all the pieces you'd like to have on the offensive line, you have a new quarterback with a new offensive coordinator. So you add chaos or a lot of pressure, things can go off the rail pretty quick. Like you said, Notre Dame's returning about 61% of their offense, 60% of their defense. But Texas A&M is returning 77% of their offense and 67% of their defense. And we know this roster has got a lot of guys on it. This is the 6th overall ranked team talent. And we know Jimbo Fisher recruited the hell out of that team. And I mean, this is a Texas A&M team that's had a number of number 1 ranked overall team talents in the last 5 years. So, I mean, they got guys on that roster, no doubt about it. Now, Notre Dame does as well, but there are a lot of headwinds, it seems like, for Notre Dame here. Now, I don't think we're not betting on this either which way. I think at the current number, what we make it, there's just no angle here. But if I'm a Texas A&M backer here, I can understand, I can convince myself that maybe a -3 is an okay bet, especially if you can pick up a -2 in the market. It's not that crazy that they could win here. You're getting an improvement, in my opinion, in head coach, new staff. You maybe get a breath of fresh air for Texas A&M, a whole new kind of chapter. And Notre Dame seems like they have more headwinds. So for me, if I had to bet this, I would probably take the A&M -3. But from the professional syndicate side, no value, nothing to chase here, really nothing to see here from my perspective there.
Yeah, makes sense. And I want to fact check myself here in real time. It's not the lowest, but there's one other game who has a lower total. That's Miami, Ohio, and Northwestern for a grand total of 39.5. Shout out. All right, boys. lot of big matchups this coming week. We've talked about a bunch of them. Let's dive into one more, shall we? Let's move on down. This is a Sunday night game. Am I correct on that one?
Yeah.
This is
In
LSU in Vegas, baby. It doesn't get better than that. LSU versus USC here. So another, for my money at least, one of the more intriguing matchups, just in terms of what these teams were last year, particularly on the offensive side of the ball and the offensive production that they had, and what they're going to be. Obviously, both teams losing high caliber quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. So, Steve, I want to start with you here a little bit. The one interesting thing that I'm thinking of with this one here, and you can see again, this opened at 6. We put the number at 11. The current number is at 4, unfortunately, so it kind of has been moving against us. But we took officially. Does anyone remember what number? Did we get a 6?
We have a 6 in the market before just right.
6.
Yeah, right before we started, the market started buyback, so it's now sitting at 5.
Okay. So my question to you, Steve, is which team defensively is going to show up first? My personal opinion, kind of a coin flip, but I like what USC is or has done, at least from a coordinator perspective. They brought in D'Anton Lynn from UCLA, who headed up a pretty efficient defense in its own right in UCLA last year. So they're at least trying to do some things on that side of the ball. Brian Kelly, and I guess to give him credit too, he cleaned house basically on the defensive side of the ball, hired all new coordinators, all the on-field staff is replaced. So these teams are both trying to do something defensively, but I don't know. What do you think? Which one of these teams shows up first?
Well, I don't even think, surprisingly, it's the defense I'm worried about. It's the offense. I mean, I know that sounds counterintuitive when you have two piss poor defenses that played last year, but let me explain what I mean, right? So you mentioned you have the two high caliber quarterbacks who are going, right? So let's start with USC. Yes, Caleb Williams, shout out Chicago Bears. He's there now, but what are we getting? We're getting Miller Moss, right? He's a 3-year backup. We've seen him play in the Holiday Bowl. They beat the number 19 Louisville. He went 23 for 33, 372 yards, 6 TDs, and 1 pick. This guy knows the system. He's been there for a while, and he's ready to shine. Now, on the opposite end, replacing Jaden Daniels, you kind of have a similar situation. You have Garrett Nussmeier coming in. Again, guy's been there, 3-year veteran at LSU. He played in the ReliaQuest Bowl, beat Wisconsin 35-31. Went 31 for 45, 395 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. So you are getting pretty high caliber quarterbacks, or at least seemingly high caliber quarterbacks, who should be able to carry the offense forward, as well as a receiving core that looks to be replenished for both teams. So why am I not worried about the defense? With Jaden Daniels, it's going to be counterintuitive because we have LSU here. Jaden Daniels was LSU's leading rusher at over 1,100 yards. So when you look at their EPA per play from the run side, LSU was number 1 in the country. And so I'm concerned about what happens when you take away not just a good throwing quarterback, but literally your leading rusher. And then, oh, by the way, your top rusher, your top running back, Logan Diggs, he's gone now too. So what does that look like for LSU's offense against an SC defense or against an SC team that, yeah, it's looking to get better on defense, but their offense is probably not going to miss a lot of steps. Now, the one other thing I'll talk about real quick, yes, obviously Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, receivers for LSU, both gone to the draft. They do have some reloading going on there for LSU, most notably, they picked up CJ Daniels from Liberty. So I'm more concerned that LSU's offense can't keep up with SC's offense, and SC defense just has to do a little bit less just to make sure SC comes out on top. With that being said, again, we have the -6. The market is starting to buy back up to the -5, like Seth said, down from -4. But I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm a little nervous about this game.
Yeah, it's fair. Well, let me try to cheer you up then. I couldn't disagree with you more. So you're comparing Miller Moss to Garrett Nussmeier. That to me is blasphemy. I mean, if you go look at the Heisman market right now, you're going to see Nussmeier way ahead of Miller Moss. Now, obviously, probabilistic wise, that means that it's headed in the direction there. But of course, Miller Moss could do something. But I think we're talking SEC ball and quote unquote new Big Ten ball. And yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is a fair assessment. We're talking about the 8th overall roster in the United States with LSU here, right? So if you're worried about them having a running back, let me put those at ease. They have the number 1 rated offensive line. Okay. So I'm not worried that they don't have a dude or dudes to replace some of that running efficiency. And again, Nussmeier, I think, is going to be the guy. They've passed on plenty of 5-star recruits at LSU to keep and retain him over the last couple of years. And I got to take you back 2 years. We saw Nussmeier in a game against Georgia where Jaden Daniels got hurt. And he did as much as he could. I wouldn't say he lit up Georgia, but he led that team down the field and scored. So I think that this is going to be a really good, passing of the torch, so to speak. Now, do they play different styles? 100%. But I think, Kelly knows this, and he's going to coach and have this offense looking to be more pass efficient or just as pass efficient as they were last year, and then fill in that running game, with a more traditional running back. And then Miller Moss, I think in USC, I'm not saying that this is a slam dunk, but I just think there's so much more upside here with LSU than what you're getting at USC. Now, the one caveat to all that I did not realize, the one headwind that USC doesn't have, because they have a lot of the returning production issues that are the same, LSU has a new offensive coordinator, and that's something that I haven't really been hearing a lot in the media or anyone really talking about. And that could be, the linchpin here of your stress, Steve, is maybe there's just too much in week 1 to overcome with a new offensive coordinator and, running back and quarterback and all this stuff. But I like LSU a lot more here.
Yeah, so I do have a legitimate question for you. This is not kind of like a making my own point thing, but I am genuinely trying to learn. So going back to your point about LSU having the upside, being able to replace, and you're absolutely right. They're going to have to do a running back by committee. They did get Caden Durham. He's 4-star recruit to help with that backfield. But you look at their team talent. LSU comes in with a team talent of 2501, and SC comes in at 2455. So you talk about ranks fairly similar. But what I want to ask, Seth, is when we're looking at these team talent scores, how much of it's like how much weight should we be putting on a point by point difference, right? Like, are we looking at things saying, okay, well, really anything within 10% is practically fair or blah blah blah? Like, how much of a distance can you put in between X amount of points? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair call out. I think we had posted some stuff, and like the SC team has dropped 9 points in rankings, right? If you actually look at who they were last year and where they ranked and who they are here or who they are this year and ranked. But you're right. It's more of a continuous variable. I would say these teams are somewhat similar. I mean, it's all relative, right? And that's where it gets tricky. So USC is highly talented compared to Temple, but they're a little bit worse from a talent standpoint than LSU, right? And so our model is quantifying each individual point difference in those talent scores. But to be frank with you, yeah, the effect size of talent isn't like for every 0.5 points you gain like 2 points or something like that on the spread. It's much, much less than that. So in this case, it's definitely contributing to the model liking LSU, no doubt about it. But I think it's a lot of other things like you're seeing these numbers and these scores in the SEC. SE's numbers, as far as the model is concerned, is thinking these is happening in the Big Ten when we know that's not even true. It was happening in the Pac-12. So I think that's a fair amount of the driver here is if you look at, and you talked about the matchup at the beginning, is Miller Moss going against Louisville the same as LSU going against Wisconsin? I would say no. I would say Wisconsin's a much better defense, much better team, but that's my opinion versus a Louisville team in the ACC. It's just different talent.
Sure. And I want to make one quick call out because I know we had this all last year, right? LSU loses week 1 to Florida State, ironically, right? And everyone's like, oh, the year is over, it's done. And then LSU goes on to have like, I don't want to say quietly, but maybe underappreciatively, one of the finest offensive seasons. And not like a subjectively, like objectively ranked number 1 in our terms of our offensive EPA metrics, right? And I remember we got so much hate about being high on LSU because their defense is trash and they lost to Florida State, and then they just go in and they just for the most part blow teams out. They doing pretty well except I think that one like hiccup to Ole Miss, but to your point about SEC play, that definitely should be a factor and will be a factor.
Yeah. But I think
cannot wait for.
I think our 11 points is wrong. I've been trying to think a lot about what it is. I think what's happening is we're a little bit overinflating the neutral field like Vegas thing. I've been trying to kind of play around and understand that. But yeah, especially the market's moving against us, so that also doesn't feel good. It'll be really interesting to see where this closes. I'd love this to close at 7. I don't think it's going to. I think it's probably going to close right at 4 where it's been.
All right, so that was all of the matchups we wanted to preview for week 1. Let's dive into one of the big reasons why we're here, boys. Let's talk about model projections for week 1. So let's pull up we'll call it the card, the model bets here for week 1 here. So quite a handful. We have a couple of things on here. You know, we give you the opening spread, our model output at the front there, and then where the current spread is and the cover probabilities. So talked about a couple of these matchups already, and I teased it at the beginning, so I'll just maybe lead off with it real quick. Troy and Nevada, and talk about line movement of the week. And perhaps, do you guys think this is just an overreaction, maybe, or course correcting based on what Nevada did to SMU in that game?
Nevada's quarterback is out. No, he's injured. He's not playing. I don't understand this at all. You're seeing a little bit of buying though. It was sitting at 8. It got to 8.5, 9. It got to 10. Got bought back down. So I don't know. It's wild. That's all I can say. It
is wild. It's not good for us. Let's put it that way.
No, it doesn't feel good. I can't tell you if it's good for us. Trust me. I am so deep in these data, and I can tell you, year in and year out, you see the same thing. You see these week 0 teams. You see what the market opened at week 0, and then you see what their original week 1 spread was before the week 0 game, and then you see this crazy overreaction. A good example last year, my Hawaii versus Vanderbilt, and then Hawaii was like 8-point dogs to Stanford in week 1 after week 0, and it was 8 before the game was played, and then once the game was played and they beat Vanderbilt, then it would move to like Hawaii +3, and Hawaii lost by 14. So like, this is a phenomenon I see. You can go back like multiple years, 4 or 5 years, and you can see the same thing over and over and over and over and over. I wouldn't put a whole lot of it in it. Obviously, from a CLV standpoint, it's great for our accounts. We look like square bettors. We're like something like a negative like 20% edge on that bet. But yeah, that to me is a crazy overreaction. How about the Texas though? That's the opposite of a account saver, is an account torture. We have Texas 36.5. RAS gave this out, Colorado State 30 plus 36.5. RAS gave this out. It's now sitting at 31. I think we have like something like a 30% edge on that bet.
Yeah, I'll have to double check. Hopefully, I made those bets at the same book, because if not, to your point, one of them's going to probably really flag me here. But Steve, I want to tell me, give me one matchup from the card here that you're eyeballing, either that you love or that you hate.
Yeah, well, the one I love is Georgia Tech because they're already cashed. So shout out, we'll officially want to know. But yeah, besides the ones we haven't talked about yet, this is going to be a little bit of homerism. But looking at Arizona coming in, just it feels good to have Fafita and back. Looking to raise hell. A lot of new. Coming in with the new head coach, obviously seeing what that's going to look like. But, looking at New Mexico being 14-point dogs at FCS Montana State last week, talking about overreactions. Now, they did pull up, one hell of a fight and kind of got out to a lot in the beginning. But this is a New Mexico team. I think, I'm looking to see what they actually are. I think this is, from what I saw last week to what we have on the model, what we have on the website in terms of team statistics and team data. I'm loving Arizona's chances. And, I'll be in Tucson because that's where I'm at. Seth will be in Tucson. We'll be watching this game. And it'll be a feel-good story to end the weekend out.
Yeah.
All right. Shout out, Seth. From what the data has shown so far and all the analysis going into week 1 here, same question. One matchup, one game you love and one that you hate, or one that you hate.
Yeah, so Temple plus 42.5. I have to say, like, I'm shaking in my boots. It feels so gross. The market's with us here, though. It got to that 42.5, 43 number, and it gets bought back down every time. So the kind of market is seeing what we're seeing, which is 42 is a tough spread. So that one's got me shaking in my boots, and probably the one I feel the worst about. I like the Arizona bet. I don't know. I kind of happy that we're betting on this upside of Nebraska. Like, I feel like Nebraska has a lot of quiet hype, or maybe it's loud hype. On paper, an offense that should be like super improved from last year, and like maybe a team that wins by 50. And so I'm excited to be on that, although it's a big spread. So those are for me the biggest one. We've seen a lot of movement, but for the most part, we've seen CLV in the vast majority of them. This FAU versus Michigan State bet, it's moved against us quite a lot. I think I have an 11.5 markets now sitting at 14. I'm really perplexed by that. I guess a lot of buying on the potential of what Michigan State can be this year. I don't really see it, but that's one that the market has really basically told us we goofed on.
Yeah. To the point we kind of kicked off with here, week 0 and talking about variance, all the dogs covering. I think we got 5 and 5 left. I think we have 5 favorites left and 5 dogs left. So yeah, so kind of evenly split. So I know it doesn't mean much, but it will be a fun anecdotal point to kind of look back on after week 1 concludes. So
can I go through for the cards real quick? Can I just go through all the official bets and numbers we have so people can follow along? So we have FAU plus 11.5 on Friday, Temple plus 42.5 on Friday. Moving to Saturday, we have ASU minus 6.5, IU 19.5, Arizona minus 30, Colorado State 36.5, UCLA minus 13.5, Nebraska minus 27.5, Troy minus 15.5. Oh boy. West Virginia plus 10.5. And then, as we talked about, LSU minus 6. We also nibbled very early in the market. We have a Michigan minus 20.5, minus 106, but that was really kind of a combination of price. So those are kind of our official plays going into week 1. I think it's a total of 12 games. We had a Georgia Tech plus 13, which we already covered. So it's going to be a big slate. It's going to be a big Saturday, and man, I'm more than excited. I'm really digging these being back on the West Coast. Like, I'm like looking, games start at 4 p.m. I'm like, dang, I don't even got to finish work and I can start.
West Coast, best coast. Yeah.
Now I will say I had to wake up. Last weekend. I woke up at 6:20 and I was 20 minutes late for a college game day. So that was a big downside for me.
Just DVR that shit, man. Fast forward through the commercials.
It's for the love of the game.
I feel you, man. I feel you. But yes, with you 100%, it's going to be an exciting weekend. Going to be an exciting season, period, point blank. So we're very excited. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Again, we'll be doing this every single week. If you're still here, please make sure you hit that like button on the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It help us out tremendously. And in the comments, please let us know which matchups you guys want us to take a look at for week 2, week 3, any week this season. Who cares?
And if you want a game of value, like what's this game? What do you guys make this game? What's the value? Just let us know in the comments. We'll respond with what our model makes that game.
100%, yes. All right, Seth, Steve, it's been real. We'll see you guys next week after week 1 concludes, talking about week 2 preview or week 2 matchups and all the goodness. So, all right, boys, it's been real. Everyone, take care. Have a good night.